Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. While we're waiting, if you want to say hello in the chat box, let us know where you're joining us from. Hello to everyone who's just joining us. We're going to get started in a minute. We're just saying hello in the chat box right now. See, we have some folks in California, Texas, Utah, Maryland, some more California, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Missouri, New York. Hello, everyone. Hello, Indiana. Those of you just coming in, we're saying hello in the chat box. Make sure when you're typing your chat in the chat box, make sure it's going to all panelists and attendees if you want everybody to see it. Hello, Michigan and Texas, Georgia. Hello, everyone. Great. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome again. Your phone line is muted. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording and the slides will be shared. Welcome to our webinar on Don't Let Your Passion for Your Nonprofit's Mission Burn You Out. My name is Leslie Gabay-Swanston. I'm the Director of Program and Systems Quality at the National Summer Learning Association. Before we get started, here's a little bit of an overview of our discussion today. First, I'll share a little bit about NSLA for those of you who are unfamiliar with us before we hear from our featured guest. After that, we'll wrap up. We'll have some time for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up with some announcements about upcoming events. As we're going along, feel free to add your questions to the Q&A box. I'll be keeping an eye on both the chat box and the Q&A box, but it's a little bit easier for us to see the questions that you want asked if they're in the Q&A box. So feel free to do that as we're going along. So a little bit about NSLA. The National Summer Learning Association is the only national nonprofit exclusively focused on addressing the achievement and opportunity gaps by increasing access to summer learning opportunities. NSLA's goal is to increase nationwide the number of high-quality summer learning opportunities. To achieve this goal, NSLA recognizes and disseminates what works, offers expertise and support for programs and communities, and advocates for summer learning as a solution for equity and excellence in education. NSLA's work is driven by the belief that all children and youth deserve high-quality summer learning experiences that will help them succeed in college, career, and life. Core to our work is the recognition that high-quality summer learning programs work and have been shown to improve reading and math skills, school attachment, motivation, and relationships with adults and peers. We know that summer is a time of great inequity for young people, and we believe that promoting and supporting summer opportunities is a way to address this. This goes beyond the summer learning that's in our name. We also want to see programs and communities addressing access to other resources like meals and youth employment. Summer is a time for innovation and exploration. Without some of the constraints of the school year, kids are able to try different ways of learning and interact with other adults and peers that they might not otherwise. It's also a time of innovation for adults, whether that's is opportunities for professional development, trying out new teaching methods, or exploring new partnerships. So I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker today, Fawn Zarge, principal of the Fawn Zarge Training. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Fawn. Oh, fun, I think you're still muted.
You know, you would think after how many months we've been doing this that I would have that smoothly, right? Thank you. So happy to be here, and really, it is honestly a privilege to be here. The work that all of you do, I don't need to tell you, but it's so mission critical, and it was already an enormous task before this pandemic started. I know that your jobs have only become infinitely harder, and I hope that today provides an opportunity for you to get some tools and think about yourselves for a bit, which we're gonna jump into in just a moment. As Leslie mentioned, she's gonna keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A. I'm gonna do the same. I'll just sort of give you a sense of how we're gonna do this today. I'm gonna share some information about 45 minutes or so, and then open the floor up to Q&A. But that said, I really don't mind being interrupted. If you have a question or you want something clarified, please don't hesitate to send that in. The other thing that would be great is to get a sense, if you don't mind putting this into the chat, sort of what it is that would be most helpful for you to hear today. I can't promise that we're gonna get to all of it, but it would be really great to get a feel for that. So let me just first share my screen with you. And 1 second, see here, make sure it's all working. All right, hopefully that is working. Wait a second. Can you get, Leslie, I see you on my screen. Can folks still see me?
Yep, they can see you.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, good. All right, so what we're gonna do today is we're gonna do something that you probably don't get to do too often because you're always thinking about everybody else who you serve. So you're gonna have a chance to really think about yourself and what you can do for yourself so that you can continue doing this important work. And then we'll also talk about, we'll shift into 2 other topics. One is what can you do for yourself to take care of yourself, but then also this concept of, well, you still have to do the work. So what can you do while you're in the workplace to make things sort of sustainable for you? And then also particularly for those of you who lead other people, you know, how do you make sure that you're able to keep people motivated and engaged when people are doing things that are really different from what they thought they'd be doing right now? Maybe you're doing them with fewer resources, you're doing them without your colleagues who may be furloughed, you are probably have responsibilities that have been expanded, all of those sorts of things. And so how does everybody stay engaged? How do you do that? And so those are sort of the 3 areas that we're going to talk about. And I see someone is writing in here some tips on saying no when you still want to be involved in the work. And we are gonna touch base on that. So I'm glad that that's mentioned. So without further ado, let's jump in so that we use our time really well. And you may be wondering why in the world there's a shopping cart on your screen. So here's why. I want you to think about what happens when you go to the grocery store, which we probably used to do a little more often than we're doing these days. But when you go to the grocery store and you get a cart with a bad wheel, you know what I'm talking about, where suddenly you're about 30 feet inside the store and you realize that you've got a cart with a bum wheel. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're groaning, you're thinking, oh no, I've got one of these carts that only goes left. Or I've got a cart that's so loud, everybody's looking at me. And so then you're quickly doing that calculus in your head. How many things are on my list? Can I just deal with it and push this cart through? Or do I have to now stop, turn around, go back out to the front of the store and grab another cart? This is sort of like the difference between stress and burnout. Stress is something that's tolerable for the short term, and stress isn't all bad. So if you just have, 5, 6 items on your list, fine, you deal with the cart. Burnout is like trying to push that cart through the store for 45 minutes, right? Every single day doing that. And that's not sustainable. And it's very, very important to understand what that distinction is, because lots of us say, oh, I'm so burnt out, I'm so burnt out. And some people are, but some of us are really on our way. But we have to be able to recognize how burnout actually presents itself, because it does not happen overnight. It's something that happens because you have had sort of an unsustainable amount of work, although it's not all about the hours, and we'll talk about that. It has to do with the fact that you don't have enough resources and you don't have enough time to recharge. So pay attention to these 3 pieces. This is how burnout presents itself. I'm not going to belabor this, but I do want to mention it because, you have to know how to look out for it in yourself as well as for the people around you, and certainly the people who report to you. It presents as exhaustion when you're suddenly not feeling energized anymore to get out of bed in the morning and do the things that you used to be very excited about doing. You become more cynical. And sometimes you even start to feel like I'm no longer effective in my job. And what's important to note here is that you don't have to have all three. You can have just one, you can have two, and they don't present in any particular order. And the other reason why it's very, very important to know how these present and be on the lookout for them is because very typically people are reluctant to come forward and say, I'm getting cynical, or I just feel tired every day coming to work. I'm not as excited anymore. And certainly your high performers tend to just say, I'm going to keep taking one for the team. And my guess is a lot of you are really like that. You understand what is being asked of you right now, and you're pushing through and you're pushing through. And unfortunately, what happens is if you don't intervene before you get to this place of burnout, either you wind up really having a physical sort of breakdown of sorts, or for those of you who lead other people, sometimes you don't know that some of your best people are burnt out until they're sitting across from you telling you that they are giving notice, they've taken another job. So these are just things that I want you to pay attention to. So now, as I promised, I want you to have an opportunity at the very beginning of this to really think about, yourself, because what you prioritize really does matter. So I'm going to ask you to just grab a piece of paper, whatever you have nearby, grab a pen and a paper, and write down, without thinking about it too much, what the three biggest priorities are in your life right now in order. This is your entire life, your work and your personal life. What are your three biggest priorities in order? And if you feel comfortable, go ahead and send in one or two, your top two, to the chat. So I'm going to be quiet for a moment while you do that. Don't overthink this. All right, I see some answers coming in. Keep them coming. It's really good for, not just for me to see them, it's good for everybody to see what everyone has as their priorities. I see work relationships, volunteer commitments. Family, work, friends. Work. Health, bills, food, and family, organization, day job, work, home, and family. Good, these are good to see. I'm going to give it another moment or two. I want people to have a chance. Finding purpose in my work, family, friends, house, my daughter, work, my relationship, work, marriage, health, sleep, good, relationships, family, work, friends, graduate school. I'm seeing some real themes here. Good. Okay. So feel free to keep sending them in. I see people have got some real focus on what's going on at work, understandably. So here's what I noted from what came in, and here's what I know is probably true without even being with all of you in person and being able to actually see folks raise their hands. I have done this exercise dozens and dozens of times with folks, and what I find almost always is that if anybody, very, very few people ever put themselves as first on this list, right? And why is that? Why are you not first on this list? And you can feel free to share those in your answers in the chat. But most people will say, well, because my family needs me. There's not really time for myself. I actually had somebody in a session, it was very interesting. I was doing a session for an umbrella of nonprofits, and this one woman looked at me when I asked the question, why is no one on their list? And she said, it never even occurred to me to put myself on there. Oh, and someone just wrote that, didn't even think of myself. So there you go. Thank you. And so this is a really important call out for us to consider. Why is it that we're not thinking of ourselves? Or even if we did, why didn't we put ourselves on that list? And so this is something that is super, super important for you to think about and take away from this session, because you are actually your most important asset to yourself, to your work, to your family, to your volunteer commitments, to all the other things that you mentioned. We all know how banks work, right? Put money in, you take money out. Put money in, you take money out. And you know what happens if you're continually withdrawing money and you haven't deposited anything. You're going to become overdrawn. Well, the same thing is true for us. There are all these withdrawals happening in our lives, and they're not bad. They're actually the things that make our lives really, really, enriching. Many of us find great meaning in our work and our volunteer commitments and in helping our friends and our family and all the other things that color our lives. So we're not saying that we want to get rid of them, even though we might need to, sort of pare them back a little bit. But most of us are not putting anything in, and so we're totally depleted. So you have to be your first priority, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to bring your A game to your job, to your family, to all of these other pieces of your life. So I really encourage you to think about this later on. You can maybe print a picture of a little piggy bank and put it up so on your fridge or wherever you're going to see it all the time. But remember that you have to invest in yourself. It's not something that's sort of a nice to do. It's actually required. How do you do that? So it's good to say that, but how do we actually put that into action? Well, there are really three things that are non-negotiable in order to do that: sleep, exercise, and personal fuel. I don't want to belabor these, but I really do want to speak about each of them for a moment. I'm sure some of you hear sleep and you're rolling your eyes and you're thinking, yeah, that's nice. I can't do that. I have got really complex life at home as well as work. And that is really true. And all of these things that are up on your screen right now, all of those are much harder right now for so many of us, because in addition to having, an increase in our work demands, many of us are navigating really, really tricky home situations. Whether you have little kids at home, if you're taking care of elderly parents who live nearby or out of state, we have lots of things going on. Many of us are feeling a lot of financial anxiety right now. So you feel like, gosh, these are things that are harder to do, and they are. And yet they're still extremely important. So when it comes to sleep, we all know, you've heard it a million times, the data is out there, that when you get enough rest, and for most adults, it's around 7 hours is really what you need. When you're getting enough rest, you are a better problem solver. You handle stress better. I mean, in addition to all the physical, biological benefits that it fights all sorts of chronic diseases, but you actually are able to be more creative. And you certainly are all needing to be very creative in your programs right now. So it allows you to do all those things much better. You know that feeling when you're sitting in, a meeting, a Zoom, wherever it might be these days, and you're trying to integrate a lot of different information and solve a problem. If you've had enough rest, you can do that much, much faster. So what I will say is, think about trying to increase the amount of sleep that you're getting. Not overnight. If you're only getting 5 hours of sleep, you're not going to switch to 7 hours tonight. Set your alarm for 15 minutes earlier so you can try to unwind 15 minutes earlier. Or set alert on your computer so you know this is the last time I'm going to check my email. I'm not going to check it at 9:30 at night and then get sucked into another hour and a half of work. So really try to set those things so they start to become more better habits for you. And I will tell you, I hope you do not log off right now, but I really am telling you that even though there's a lot of good content to come, this is probably the most important takeaway of this entire session. So please focus on that. Now, in terms of exercise, we all know that fights stress, which is obviously what we know we have to do, because stress, is what eventually will lead us to burnout. A lot of people, what I find, really have a hard time doing this because they feel like there's one particular way that they have to fit it into their life. Oh, I've got to work out for an hour a day, five times a day. No, unless you're under the care of a doctor who is prescribing a particular type of regimen for you, fit it in however it works for you and in whatever way it's going to stick. So if that's 3 10-minute walks, awesome, do that. If it's that you have to, you pay for a class, whether it's online, I think most of us are not back into any sort of in-person classes right now, and that commitment is going to make you stick with it, fantastic. Whatever is going to work for you, that's really what you want to be doing. In addition to that, personal fuel. What does this mean? This means the things that we really enjoy, that charge us up, whether it's a lot of the things that we haven't been able to do for many months now. Brunch with friends, go out with drinks with your coworkers, after work, maybe just have extra time to go read or take a class. Things that we are not available to us and we don't have time to do, or they're just not safe for us to do. But we still need to find ways to recharge, because again, remember, we're giving to everybody else. And when you're constantly doing that and not bringing anything into yourself, you are going to become emotionally depleted. So think about the things that you enjoy, and you might have to get creative. If you have 3 kids under the age of 5 at home, you might have to lock yourself in the bathroom for 10 minutes to read a magazine, right? So you might have to get very creative that way, but it doesn't mean that it's still not something extremely important to do. So now what I would like you to do, because I know that a lot of us, we go to these sessions and we think, oh, that's a great idea. And then the second you log off, you get right back into your work and we haven't really made a plan to get it done. So I'm going to ask you to take out your calendar. If it's on your phone, just go to the calendar. Don't check your email. Go to whatever calendar you have, and I want you to schedule something right now for yourself that resonated here. It may be a recurring event to set a sleep alarm. It might be a reminder to take a walk. It could be just scheduling time to call your brother who lives across the country so you can have a 20-minute conversation. So take out something to schedule in right now. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. And if you are able to, good, somebody is sharing what it is that you're going to do. So put that into the chat too, so we can all see what we're going to commit to doing. More fitness. Good. And again, it doesn't have to be any particular way, whatever works for you. You live in an apartment building and nobody knows about the back stairwell and you can socially distance, run the stairwell. Sleep, weekly tennis, 20 minutes of exercise. Good. And what I'm going to tell you also about the exercise, oh, there's such good ones coming in here. Work on my manuscript. I see a lot of sleep, yoga, walk. Is keep in mind when it comes to the exercise, there are days, I mean, I'm a pretty regular exerciser, and I would say though, I'm not somebody who, gets excited and says, yay, I can't wait to exercise in the morning. I do it because I know I need to do it. And so even if I wake up and I'm not feeling great and all I can muster is 10 minutes, sometimes I'll just do those 10 minutes. So don't knock it off your list just because you can't do what you really planned on doing. I see take my dogs for a walk. Yeah, a lot of dog walkers these days. Writing, learn a new craft or hobby. Increase personal ice cream time with husband. Love it. Okay, good. I hope you guys have scheduled these into your calendars. If it's appropriate, make it a recurring event so that you see it there every single week. Read. Okay, awesome. All right, feel free to keep sharing these. I'll keep moving, but if other people want to take a look at those, keep them coming in. Okay, so now that you have these non-negotiables, you've scheduled it. I want you to think about wellness in general. We're going to start to pivot into the workplace, right? So a lot of times people think about wellness as being something very separate, right? I just need to take care of myself and then I have my work life. Really, if we want to change how we take care of ourselves and the quality of our work culture, we really want to integrate it. It should be baked in. So what does that mean? It means 3 different things. One is to live it for yourself, and that's what we just talked about it. And then you want to act on it and you want to model it. So acting on it, what does that look like? This means that we have to also be in charge of making sure that the people around us are also taking care of themselves, because we wind up fueling each other when we do that. So I remember I used to work in a school, and there was this lovely woman who, for some reason, she had like a 6th sense, and she always knew which day to pop her head in and say, hey, Fawn, have you eaten lunch today? I haven't seen you, by the microwave. Right? She sort of checked in with me to make sure that I was taking care of myself. She thought I was a little bit maybe frantic that day. For those of you who are managers, and it's actually not even only if you're a manager or a leader, send a text, schedule it if you want, to your team at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that says, hey, have you gone out and taken a walk today? Have you taken a break? Or I know it's been a long week. Ask them a question. Send them a question by text. What I want to hear in the next hour, what you're doing to take care of yourself today. And so that kind of accountability is really, really helpful, because it not only demonstrates how important it is, but it really shows that you're actually interested in what it is that people are doing. You understand how critical it is to your mission. And I was talking to someone recently who was at a YMCA in, gosh, I think it was up in Vermont, and she, I think it's where it was. And she was, she was saying, like, I check in with my team all the time, and I want to know what it is that they're doing today. Or sometimes it's just letting them know that I know they've had a long week and I'm thinking of them, and that, I know that they're going to try to, get a break in the evening. But that sort of communication is really helpful. The other piece here is to model it. So let me tell you, I hear all the time from people that I work with, they'll say, I have a great manager. They're terrific. They tell me not to check my email late at night or answer emails over the weekend or to take my vacation time. But the thing is, they don't really do that. And so I don't really feel like I have permission to do that myself. So that is something that is very, very important for anyone who's in a leadership role to pay attention to, because people are going to do what we're doing, not what we say we're doing. So make sure that people see you going and taking a walk, even if it's that you're doing a walking meeting. Make sure that, if you're running out to do something personal, I don't think too many people are going out to watch their kids' sports games these days, but if you were, let them know. Send a message to your team that says, hey, I'm going to be out for the next hour. I'm going to go run by my daughter's soccer game. If it's an emergency, text me. Otherwise, I'll be back, back here, I'll back online in an hour. When you do things like that, you set the example that then, in addition to just telling people that you want them to do it, they're going to be much more inclined to do that. So that's more of how you're going to actually bake these into what you're doing. Now, some of you may be sitting here thinking, okay, this is all really well and good, but the problem is I have way too much on my plate. I just can't do this. And every day it looks like I have, 10, 20 items that are super, super high priority items. So here's what I really suggest doing is thinking about everything every day as categorized into either a high payoff or a low payoff item. And look, I know that that is very, very hard in the work that you do because so much really is, in fact, high payoff. But the only way that you're going to be effective and not drive yourself into the ground is to make those decisions. What is that one big thing that I have to do today? Sometimes a very helpful question to ask yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed is, what is that thing that if left undone is going to have the biggest negative consequence for me? And so what this allows you to do is it allows you to not only sort of prioritize your list, if you will, but then it also allows you to really think about, well, when is it that I'm going to get that done? Sometimes you don't have control over when you do those high payoff items, but if you can then align them with when you are at your best, then that's really going to be sort of most effective for you. You're going to use your energy a lot better. We have a limited amount of time, but we have a lot more control over our energy. And so think about that high payoff, those low payoff items. So once you start thinking about it this way, then I know what happens. Now you're thinking, but what? People are always asking things of me. Does anyone ever feel this way, where you hear yourself, you are saying yes, right? You're saying it out loud, but inside you're screaming, no, 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 I don't want to do it. Now, a few people already wrote about this, but I'm curious if you don't mind sharing in the chat. What are the sorts of things that you are having difficulty saying no to? And my guess is some of them are things that you need to say yes to. I'm not suggesting everybody go back to their different workplaces and say, well, this lady Fawn, she said that I should feel permission to say no if I am not really all in doing that activity. No, we're team players. We have to step up and we have to say yes sometimes. But think about what are those things where you're having trouble setting boundaries, because that's part of the problem is that we have a lot of inbound at us. And look, in the nature of the work that you do, you are very responsive people. You're people who want to serve others. And so that makes it that much harder. We don't want to disappoint people. We don't want to leave people in a situation where they don't have what they need or they don't have somebody to help them. And yet there are places that you have to find or you have to set those boundaries. Someone just wrote, we support a network of out-of-school providers. It's hard to say no to any support they think they can use, and everything is an experiment right now. Yes, their timeframes become my crises. Good. These are both so good. In a minute, we're actually going to talk about experimentation. So that's actually super, it's a great segue. But I really like what someone said. Their crises become my crises. And that is a very important call out, because one of the reasons that we say yes and we don't set those boundaries is because we do, sometimes we react in the moment because we want to be responsive, but we're not really responding, we're reacting, and we let other people's emergencies become our own emergencies. And sometimes they should, but sometimes they shouldn't. And sometimes we can actually say, I actually want to really be able to help you with this. Can we, revisit this, in an hour? Can I get back to you later? Or I'm actually not able to, but let me connect you with someone else who can help. There are ways to still support other people without you always taking it on. Someone just said, we're still a new organization. So in terms of getting our names, I'm still getting our name out there. It's hard to say no to any established organization that wants to work together. Absolutely. And you can still say yes to that partnership. We want to work with you. Let's talk about how that might work right now. Let's talk about that timeline. And you can have that conversation with them. There are ways to do that. So what I will say, and I wish we had more time to really dive into this, but I did include a worksheet here that we're not going to walk through, but I wanted to include it because I know that you're going to have access to this recording later. And this is a really great tool that you can use to reflect on, what is it that I'm having a hard time, what boundary am I having a hard time maintaining? What are some things that I can try? They may not all work at first, but what are some things that I can try to improve that boundary? And then there are places for you to really think about, how are the people going to respond? Because I can promise you that if you're someone who normally says yes, it's going to take a while for people to get used to you setting those boundaries. But then I also want you to think about, if I set this boundary, how will things be better? Is it that I'm actually going to be able to work on the things that are my biggest priorities at work? Or is it that I will finally have time for myself? I'll give you an example of a place that I set a boundary most days. I really try very hard to not respond to email first in the morning. I try to keep the outbound out so that I can get that exercise in, because I know that if I start to respond to those messages, it's just a big snowball. So that's a place that I maintain a boundary for myself. You can think about things in your personal life, things in your work life where you need to sort of set that up a little bit more. So I encourage you to go back to this at another point so that you can sort of troubleshoot this in a way. I'm going to keep moving here because I want to make sure that we get a little bit more in before we get to Q&A. But if anyone has any questions about anything I said right now, please don't hesitate to put them into the Q&A, and we'll keep an eye on that. So now, as mentioned, we're going to really start thinking a little bit more deeply about the workplace. So what happens? How do you stay sort of energized when you really are exhausted and working nonstop and having to be creative at work? And so here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize that one of the best ways to fight burnout is to actually really be engaged in your work. And it's not to suggest that you aren't engaged in your work, but another level of engagement is to find challenges. Now, I imagine if I were sitting with all of you, you would all be looking at me going, really? Like, we haven't had enough challenges? We've had plenty. I assure you, we're highly engaged. And I'm sure that that is absolutely true. But let me talk about this in a much more specific way. What you want to really think about is finding something even small that needs to be fixed, that needs to be optimized. So you want to do this for yourself. If you manage other people, try to identify what that challenge might be. But ideally, this is going to be a challenge, something that you're going to try to tackle that does not need approval from senior leadership, does not need, there isn't going to be a lot of red tape to get it done. So let me give you an example. I was recently having a conversation with a small community agency that does a lot of art services with teenagers. And they didn't get a grant they expected to get. Their funding was obviously pulled back, and they literally needed more art supplies. And so a young man who worked there just took it on himself and reached out to 2 local art supply stores and got a bunch of supplies donated. And, that was just really, it was something that it was like, I'm going to solve this. I can do this. And he dug in to do it. And so that's, that's something that, I'm not going to say that's always easy. You might run into roadblocks, but it's a great way to actually counter some of the roadblocks that you're experiencing right now. There are a lot of things that are not working the way that you want them to and that you need them to, and yet the service that you need to deliver is still, is still just as present and as critical. So if you're trying to figure out what that challenge is, some questions to ask yourself: where can we deliver better service? What's not working as efficiently? Here is another example. Someone was recently telling me that one of the challenges they're having at their program, I think this was a Boys and Girls Club, was that the communication was really breaking down just because of social distancing. The parents that they were able to normally have more conversations with, they were not able to talk to quite as frequently for as long. And so they, set up another system through texting and email so that they could make sure that they really stayed on top of the things that were necessary. And also what's going to drive success or growth in these conditions. Now, many of you right now might not really be looking at growth, even though the needs for your programs are expanding. But what's going to drive that? And certainly for those of you who are involved in the funding piece of your programs, you may very well be looking at that. How do we grow our funding? How do we expand our philanthropy? So that's one way to really think about it. Then, as a team, and this is a little bit more for those who manage a team, is think about where you can experiment. So let me back up for a second. Maybe I shouldn't have put up the questions quite yet, but when you think about how performance works and how we perform really well, there are kind of two different types of performance. There is your tactical performance, and then there's your adaptive performance, and you need both in order to perform well. So let me explain that very simply. So if you're a teacher, your tactical performance is really when you create your curriculum for the year. This is me executing on a plan that's in place. I've really thought it through, and this is what I'm going to be planning to deliver. The adaptive is, okay, well, now I have a group of kids in front of me. I have a sense of what their learning needs are. Maybe we have less time in the classroom now. We can't do as many interactive activities. How do I need to adapt that curriculum? And so adaptive performance is, sort of where we are right now. We're having to really adapt, and we're really having to experiment. As somebody said, a lot of things are an experiment right now. And so what I really encourage people to do, and I know it's hard as a team, everyone is stretched so much, but don't let this fall by the wayside. Even if it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes that your team gets together in whatever form, virtually, or if you are in person, to do this, and ask yourself these questions, run through these. What impact did we have last week? What did we learn, right? And one of the reasons you want to do this is so that you can actually celebrate, because when we're really, really busy, we actually stop recognizing the awesome stuff that's happening, and we need to do that, because when we're not getting that sort of recognition, even if the outcome wasn't good, if there was a great effort made, if we're not getting that, that really is demoralizing, and it is a contributor to burnout. So make sure that people are getting that feedback. Then looking ahead, what's ahead this week, and how can we help each other? Why is this an important question? This is a super important question, and that is because your support system is really a big buffer against burnout. And so you want to establish each week, as you're going out there to do the work, how can we help each other out? Who are the people that I'm going to look to? Who am I going to lean on? Who can I start my week already knowing I can count on as we move ahead? And then really look at where we're at. What can we try? And it's going to be different in each of your organizations and each of your programs, but this is very, very energizing. It keeps you really focused, and again, it provides a really nice buffer to some of the inbound stress that we are experiencing. So I call it out there because it's not something that people automatically think of when they think of trying to protect themselves and their teams from the stressors that lead to burnout. So very quickly, as you think about this, think about it for yourself, because all of your workplaces probably look very, very different right now. Ask yourself, how can I use my strengths in this new environment, right? Maybe you're in a situation now where you are actually running a program with fewer staff. You don't have your colleague there with you. So really take a moment and ask yourself, okay, what is it that I can bring that's going to make this work better? Is it that I'm super, super organized? Or is it that I have great relationships with these kids? And I know that I'm going to be able to rely on that. So ask yourself that question. Which of my abilities do I want to leverage? What's going to be most meaningful for me? And then finally, what do I want to learn? Now, you may be wondering, well, why would I ask myself, what do I want to learn right now? Because I can't even think about my own, growth or professional development. But I really want you to do that. And I certainly want all the managers and leaders out there to do that, because again, lack of professional development, lack of growth is something that really causes a lot of burnout. Most of us as adults, we're learners. We want to always be learning. And so we want to level up. We always want to be gaining new skills. Well, how do you do that in this environment? And why are we doing that in this environment? Well, as I said, in addition to providing a real buffer to burnout, it also builds confidence. And so as managers, you really do need to know what are the skills that your team, is where they're looking to grow. What are the things that they could really benefit from? And, it really could be anything. And don't let resources be a roadblock to that. We all know there are lots of great free online courses, whether it's through HubSpot, whether it's OpenCourseWare. And it doesn't have to be something that's going to take you, it doesn't have to be a 9-hour course. It could be a 15-minute YouTube tutorial on using spreadsheets, if that's something that's not, a strong suit of yours, so that you can make sure that you get the data that you need compiled and organized well. So whatever that might be, I'd be very curious if you want to put into the chat, what's something that you feel like, yeah, I really still want to grow in this area, even as we are in the midst of very intense time in our work. So think about that and share that in the chat, if you will. Other things that managers can do. If you read an article of interest that you think is going to be of interest to someone who works for you, send it along. It really communicates, I've paid attention to what's important to you. And I want you to continue growing. I recently heard about a manager who had a team member who is really, really interested in growing her ESL skills. And so she just read an article that was just fascinating about some new innovation in ESL and sent that along. Man, if you're the recipient of that, it really makes you feel great. My leader knows what's important to me and is taking the time to share this. It might just be providing an introduction to someone else who they could have an interesting conversation with professionally. If you have a budget and you can send them a book that's of interest, send that along as well. So think about doing those things. Don't let professional development totally fall by the wayside. And the last thing that I really want to call out here, which is probably very evident in a lot of what we've been talking about, is the fact that there really has never been a more important time to communicate. There's a professor from, I think she's a Harvard Business School professor, and she was talking about this pandemic and what this has created for people. And she was talking more so around this idea of when people were working from home initially, and yet it really applies to everybody. And what she said is when people are no longer in their regular work environments and they're not working in the workplaces, it feels like they have been removed from the mothership. And that is very, very true. And also when we're not sort of in our regular work environments, what happens is we really feel like our mistakes are magnified in our heads. We need our managers to be communicating with us what we're doing well, where we need to course correct. We need our managers to be proactively checking in with us. Studies have showed that 40%, this is a study done in May, and I'm sure that the data still bears out now, that 40% of employees who were polled, they want their manager to be proactively checking in with us. And look, we all know a lot more about each other's personal lives right now. And while we still want to maintain appropriate boundaries, it's really important to be checking in with someone and say, hey, listen, I know that, you were having a hard time with, your school-age child and getting them what they needed. How are things going? Do you need more flexibility? Do you need more support? Not always, you can't always offer everything that you want to, but asking the questions is a big part of sort of establishing that sort of trust and dialogue that's going to allow people to come to you more often if they are feeling overwhelmed. And that's really what we want to be doing. So On that note, I've been talking at you a lot, and I really want you to have a chance to ask the questions that that are sort of relevant to you and your unique situations. So let's move to questions, and feel free to send them in through the Q&A or the chat, and I'm happy to answer them as best I can.
Thank you so much, Fawn. That was great. So like as Fawn was saying, if you have any questions right now, feel free to put those into the Q&A box. I caught one earlier in the chat box, which I'll also share. And also, I think if you would like to be able to speak, I can take you off mute as well. So go ahead.
That'd be great.
And if you'd like to speak as well. So the question I saw earlier was about advice on dealing with burnout related to poor office working relationships. So any advice there?
I'm wondering if the person who asked that question, if you can give me a little bit more color on that. I mean, it sounds like, you know, I don't know if that's sort of people asking a lot of you. I want to be able to answer that well, and I'm not sure exactly what the question is.
So I believe this, I'm trying to see who this came from. It was from a John. We have a couple Johns here. John, go ahead and raise your hand.
Oh, here we go. I think it just came in. We have a teammate who is unwilling to communicate and adjust to the experiment we are all experiencing. Okay, so that is that's extremely challenging. And obviously, without knowing all the history and the dynamic and what's been done, it's hard to necessarily know specifically what to suggest. But I do think that having a conversation about and really sort of being very upfront and saying, listen, we really value having you on this team, and getting a sense that maybe you're not comfortable with some of the things that we're trying, or that there's some reluctance in, you know, sort of having an open conversation about, you know, what it is that, you know, you're having maybe a more challenging time with, or some resistance to ideas. And so what you're wanting to do is you're trying to say, let's really have an open dialogue about this. Sometimes this happens when there isn't an open dialogue. I'm getting the sense that's probably not the case here, that this is sort of a unique situation. And maybe sometimes it's actually, what can help is giving someone a real specific role in that experiment. And just asking them, say, listen, we're all gonna take on a piece. What is it that you can take on if you feel like, you know, they're gonna take something on? Otherwise, if you, I'm not sure if you're their manager, but if you're their manager, give them the piece, assign something, find a way to actually get them invested in it, where they have some real skin in the game. Because look, you have to understand, and I'm sure you do, that change is really hard for everybody, and not everyone is going to respond to it equally. And this may be a person who is someone who just has a harder time with change. And it may be just having an honest conversation about that. What would make this easier for you? I really want to hear that. I hope that helps a lot, but if I've missed the mark on what's going on, go ahead and clarify. And certainly other questions I'm happy to hear.
Definitely. And again, if you have any questions, put those in the Q&A box, or it should be at the bottom of your screen. You should see a little hand if you want to raise your hand to come off of mute and ask your question. So I have a question here in the Q&A box. My wife is pregnant. We have a toddler. She's in school for a second master's degree, and she is the sole person responsible for the startup organization she started. What suggestions beyond the non-negotiables can I give her to balance everything she's doing?
Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I know that while not everybody on here has that exact same situation, many of you probably have, you know, similar situations where someone has so much going on, and how do you help them to navigate all of that? So I think one thing, particularly for young parents, is helping them understand that expectations have to be way lower, right? What are the things that we're not going to worry about? You know, and that's something that probably the two of you as partners can sit down, find some time, and you really do have to create, you know, find time to do this and say, all right, so what are the things that we can actually streamline? You know, I mean, I always joke with people, particularly young families, it is not a crime to feed your kids cereal for dinner, right? It's nutritious for the most part. If you're giving them nutritious cereal, you don't, there's certain things that you have to sort of say, I'm not gonna try to do that. So lowering expectations is a big piece. And the other piece is to make sure that the two of you are regularly, at least once a week, sitting down, looking at the week ahead, and that means like finding out, so what does the week look at? Let's do a check-in. Do you have any exams? Do you have a big assignment that's due? What's going on for work? What's going on for work for both of you? What's happening with your child? All of those sorts of things, and say, okay, so this is what's going on. Where do you need my help? Where do I need some time for myself? Where can I get a break? I find I do that in my own house. Now, my kids are a little bit older now, but the weeks that we don't do that, the week that my husband and I do not do that, invariably that's the week that things fall apart. That's sometimes where resentment comes up, and you don't want that to happen. It is so wonderful that you want to proactively figure out how to support her. And I think that sort of planning that regular time, put it in your calendar to check in at the beginning of the week and look at that week and keep communicating about it. And it will help. It's not an easy time. It's still going to be really busy, but it will make it easier.
Thank you.
Sure.
So any other suggestions for ways to say no when you need a break, but you still want to be involved?
Yeah. So I think that one of the, as I think I mentioned, one of the problems is that when we say no, or when we're faced with a situation where we have to respond, we feel this urgency to respond in that moment. And one of the best things that you can do is to say, let me think about it, or let me look at my schedule, or tell me more. We don't have to answer yes or no, because sometimes we're being asked to do something, and maybe our initial reaction is, I don't really think I want to do that. But then when you learn more, maybe you realize that actually it's something that isn't as difficult for you to step up and do. Or maybe it's something that you're more interested in. You really feel like it's going to be an opportunity where you can broaden your skills or interact with other people who are going to be interesting people to learn from. Or you may in fact find out that you actually do want to say no, but you really want to understand what it is that that is being asked of you. So slow down. Decide whether you have to answer in that moment. Say, let me get back to you. Let me check my schedule. And then also think, even if you want to say no, is it possible to say yes to another part of it? So it might be, listen, I actually can't be a regular part of those meetings. I really appreciate that, that you're including me. But even though I don't have that availability, what I'd be really happy to do is, if there's a particular meeting where you think my voice is going to be particularly helpful, let me know in advance. I'll be happy to join that meeting. Or my door is always open. You can always bat things around with me in advance of your meetings if that would be helpful. You might be able to say, I can't do that, but you know what? I don't know that you've met Lisa yet, who's new to our group. I actually think she'd be a great add. And can I, maybe this is something that she can help out with. So there are lots of possibilities there, but we don't always think of them if we're trying to respond to that moment. So slow down. And then just remember that saying no on the times that you really do just have to say no, it's in order to say yes to the other things that you've determined are priorities to you. And those may be work priorities, or they may be priorities having to do with some of the personal wellness pieces that we talked about. If you're always saying yes to everything else, you can't possibly have time for those things that you've already determined are most critical to your work objectives and to your personal life. So I hope that helps a little bit.
I really like that, saying no to say yes.
Yeah.
With that.
And I see another, oh, sorry, go ahead. I see another question too. I don't know if it's the same one that you see, Leslie.
Yeah, so I'll read this, something I relate to. How do you address the burnout of so many meetings right now in this era of needing to over communicate and not creating silos within a team for collaboration?
Yeah, we are zoomed out, aren't we? I say this and you're all gonna like log out immediately. So yeah, it's a very real thing. There's a lot of data right now that's showing that it is much more exhausting to be on Zoom, and even all of the meetings. We're having to have meetings for things that maybe we would have just had a 5 or 10 minute conversation about, in the hallway, in the classroom, out on the field, wherever it might be. So what do you do? Well, I mean, I think one is to really think about, when do you actually need to have those meetings, or when can you actually just have a quick phone call or an email exchange? And I think what can be helpful, and I'm hearing more and more people do it these days, is actually calling that out. Like, maybe we really need to revisit, tell people, let's really think about like what our schedule looks like, how many meetings we have. let's evaluate and decide, do we need all of these? And also think about the length of those meetings. I mean, this is the exact same advice I used to give people when we were all meeting in person. And that is, if you plan a 60-minute meeting, you will fill those 60 minutes. So do you really need them? Probably not. We can be much more efficient. So plan a 15-minute check-in or a 30-minute meeting. That's why when we were talking about the idea of experimenting with your team, I was saying, don't let that fall by the wayside, because that doesn't need to be a full hour. You can do that in 20 minutes and you'll get used to doing it. And I guarantee you that if you get that process in place, that when we get to the post-pandemic world that we're all looking forward to, you actually will have put some practices into place that are going to be so much better and more efficient for your organizations in the long term. So addressing it really head on, I think, can be very helpful.
Great. So I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A box, and I think we caught the ones that are in the chat. Bonnie, any last thoughts to share with the group before we wrap up?
So for sure, the first thing that I will say is, please, if anything else comes up, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You see my contact information there. I'm really happy to try to quickly answer some other questions that come out, and support you in all that you're doing. Like, really such a pleasure. So that's one thing I will just say. And I will say also that I do send out blogs on burnout. So if you want to go to the website, and that way you'll get those reminders in your mailbox about how to counter the burnout. But the other thing that I would really say to sort of summarize here is, please, please, please be patient with yourself. I know that when people talk about sort of first responders, frontline workers, a lot of times we're really talking about our healthcare providers who have just been doing a tremendous job. But you guys are also the front lines. You're delivering such critical services and really trying to take care of kids and families who need you so desperately right now. So be patient with yourselves, and please understand that those things we talked about at the beginning in terms of making yourself a priority and finding ways, even in small pockets, to take care of yourself, you're going to wind up serving other people much better if you do that. So that would be my final thought.
Thank you so much, Fawn. So just before, just to wrap up with a couple of things, and hopefully this reminder, we'll be sharing the recording of this webinar out with everybody. Just a couple announcements about things coming up as well. Hear more look out for more from our Voices of Summer webinar series, or you can look back at some of our past webinars on our website. A couple of ones that we have coming up in August, we're going to be doing one on learning and teaching anti-racism in OST programs. And in September, we're going to be talking about fundraising during COVID-19. A couple of opportunities coming up. The Parent Institute is offering members of NSLA's network a free pilot to use their modified version of this holistic student assessment that asks specific questions around how youth believe the pandemic has changed their social emotional needs. To find out more, you can access more information about that, the link on the screen, or you can sign up using that bottom link. And all of these will be shared in a follow-up email for you, so don't worry about having to copy down too quickly. And we're also partnering with the After School Alliance. Earlier this year, they included a survey with OST programs to learn how COVID-19 was impacting those programs. So we are partnering with them to conduct a second wave of this survey to see how programs are faring now. So we're asking you to share your story with us through the link below. It should take no more than 10 to 15 minutes to complete, and 50 random respondents will win a $50 cash prize. Finally, if you're not following us already on social media, please be sure to do that. It's the best way to learn about upcoming events and new resources. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website. You also have the opportunity to join special cohorts of peers interested in topics like sports, literacy, or youth employment. You can also find out more about our consultation support and technical assistance for your summer programs. So once again, I just want to say thank you again to Fawn for the presentation today. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and we will be in touch. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks so much.